A billionaire walked away from the woman he loved on the morning of their wedding, and 5 years later, he came face to face with 3 little boys who had his exact eyes, his jawline, his stubborn way of standing with their arms crossed. What happened next shook him to his core. Ivy Chambers had picked out her wedding dress 6 months before the ceremony. It wasn't extravagant. She wasn't that kind of woman. Simple ivory silk, fitted at the waist, with small pearl buttons running down the back. She had tried it on alone in the shop. No bridesmaids, no photographer, just her and the woman at the boutique who teared up when Ivy turned to the mirror. "You look like someone who deserves to be happy," the woman had said. Ivy had laughed and told her she was being dramatic. She wasn't laughing on the morning of October 14th. She had been in the bridal suite at the Harlow Grand for 40 minutes past the hour when her best friend, Renata, walked in with a look on her face that Ivy had never seen before and never wanted to see again. Not sadness, exactly, something worse. The careful blankness of someone delivering news they wish they didn't have to deliver. "He's not coming," Renata said. Ivy stared at her. "What do you mean he's not coming?" "He called the venue," he said. Renata stopped. "He said he's sorry." The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Ivy could hear the string quartet warming up 2 floors below. She could hear the murmur of guests. 200 people who had flown in from across the country to watch her marry Everett Cole, founder of Cole Capital, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country, and the man she had spent the last 3 years building a life with. She didn't cry. Not then. She sat down on the edge of the chaise longue in her ivory silk dress, and she looked at her hands and she thought, very clearly, "I should have listened to Renata." Renata had never fully trusted Everett. Not because of anything she could name. It was more of an instinct. "He compartmentalizes," she had told Ivy once. "He keeps you separate from everything else in his life. That's not how a man acts when he's sure." Ivy had defended him. She always defended him. She didn't defend him now. She changed out of the dress herself, folded it carefully over the back of a chair, which she would later think was a strange thing to do under the circumstances. She walked out of the Harlow Grand through a side entrance. She didn't speak to the guests. She didn't call Everett. She got in a cab and she told the driver to take her to the bus station, and when he asked where she was headed, she said she didn't know yet. She ended up 3 states away in a small city called Grayfield, where rent was cheap and no one knew her name. The first 2 months were about survival. A waitressing job. A studio apartment with a radiator that clanged through the night. Evenings spent staring at the ceiling wondering what she had done wrong. And then, on a Tuesday morning in December, she sat on the bathroom floor of that small apartment and stared at a pregnancy test until the result became undeniable. Positive. Her first thought was that she needed to call Everett. Her second thought was that she would rather walk through glass. Her third thought, and this was the one that stayed, was, "I can do this." She went to the doctor the following week. The doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Patricia. "No, wait, doctor." Mercer ran the ultrasound and then went very still for a moment before turning to Ivy with an expression that was professionally composed but not quite hiding something else. "Mrs. Chambers," she said, "I'm looking at triplets." Ivy grabbed the side of the exam table. 3. She was having 3 babies, alone, in a city where she knew no one, working a waitressing job that didn't cover her rent. The doctor said something about support systems. Ivy nodded automatically. Then she drove home, sat in her car for 20 minutes, and talked herself into being okay. She was not always okay, but she was always still there in the morning, which she eventually decided was close enough. The boys were born the following summer. She named them Sam because it was her grandfather's name. She named him Theo because she'd always loved it. And she named the third one Miles, after no one in particular, just because he looked like a Miles the moment she held him. They were small and red-faced and furious at the world, and she fell completely apart with love for all 3 of them the instant they were placed on her chest. 5 years passed. Grayfield turned out to be a decent place to raise children. The school was good, the neighbors were kind, and the diner where Ivy had started as a waitress had eventually promoted her to shift manager and then to assistant manager, a trajectory that surprised everyone except Ivy, who had always been quietly competent at everything she put her mind to. She rented a bigger place, a small house with a backyard where the boys destroyed the lawn playing soccer. Sam was the serious one, always observing. Theo was the loud one, always performing. Miles was the one who would disappear for 20 minutes and reappear having taught himself something no one asked him to learn. She loved them individually and completely. And then, on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in September, she took them to Riverside Park. She was on a bench checking her phone, while the boys fought over a soccer ball near the fountain when she felt it. That particular stillness that comes before something bad. She looked up. Everett Cole was standing 30 feet away. He was exactly as she remembered him. Tall, dark jacket, the kind of posture that comes from never having had to shrink for anything. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the boys. She watched his face as he watched them. Watched the moment the confusion became something else. Sam had his jaw. Theo had his brow. Miles had the exact way Everett had of going still when he was thinking hard. She had lived with these faces for 5 years, and she had buried the resemblance deep enough not to think about it daily. But now, watching Everett see it for himself, all of that careful burying came undone. He looked at her. She picked up her bag and called out to the boys, her voice impressively steady. "Sam, Theo, Miles, time to go." She almost made it. "Ivy." She stopped. The boys kept moving, gathering their things, oblivious. She turned slowly. Everett walked toward her with the careful, controlled movement of a man keeping himself very contained. "Are those your kids?" he asked. "Yes." Simple. Factual. His eyes moved to them again, back to her. "How old are they?" "4," she said. "They'll be 5 in June." He understood the math. She watched him understand it. The color didn't drain from his face. Everett wasn't the kind of man who showed things that easily, but something shifted. He looked like he'd just found a load-bearing wall he hadn't known was there. "Are they mine?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. The boys were coming toward her now, Sam ahead, Theo arguing about something with Miles. She had prepared for this moment in the abstract. In the abstract, it had always been clean and righteous. Standing here now, it just felt heavy. "Yes," she said. "They're yours." She took the boys home. Everett didn't follow, not that day, but she knew it wasn't over, and she was right. 3 days later, he was at her door. The conversation that followed was the hardest she'd had since the one in a hotel lobby 5 years ago when she'd called him from the bus station, not to beg, but just to say, "You should know I'm leaving." He hadn't tried to stop her. He had said he was sorry, and she had believed he meant it, and she had hung up anyway because sorry didn't change what he'd done. Now he stood in her doorway and told her he wanted to be part of their lives. She told him it wasn't that simple. He said he knew. She said he had no idea what simple meant, because simple was what she'd been doing alone for 5 years. 3 school lunches at 6 a.m., 3 sets of ear infections in the same winter. 3 kids who all wanted different things at the same moment all the time, and he was going to stand here and tell her he wanted in? Now? "I know I don't deserve it," he said. "No," she agreed. "You don't." He came back the following week, and the week after. He didn't push for anything. He brought a kite one afternoon, a blue and yellow one that was too fancy and entirely impractical, and stood at the park with it until Miles drifted over to investigate. Theo followed. Sam held out the longest, which was typical. Ivy watched from the bench with her arms crossed, telling herself she was not softening. But she noticed things. She noticed that Everett got down on the ground to help Miles with the kite string without caring about his jacket. She noticed that when Theo ran into him full speed and made him stumble, he laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polished version she remembered, but something unguarded and real. She noticed that when Sam finally approached and asked, very seriously, what Everett did for work, Everett answered the question directly without condescending, and then asked Sam what he wanted to do when he grew up, and actually listened to the answer. She noticed all of it, and she told herself it didn't mean anything. Then his lawyers sent papers. She found the envelope on a Tuesday morning, and she sat with it for a full hour before opening it. Petition for joint custody. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when she called her friend and attorney Dana Whitfield, was also steady. Her insides were a different story. Dana was sharp and practical and didn't sugarcoat things. He has money, he has lawyers, and he has the biological connection. But you have 5 years of documented sole parenting. That's significant. We fight this. They fought it. The first court appearance was disorienting. Ivy had been in that courthouse for parking violations and once for jury duty. She had never been on this side of a custody argument. Everett was across the room with his legal team, and beside him. This was the part that sent a cold wave down her spine. Was a woman named Scarlett Vane. Scarlett was Everett's girlfriend of 8 months. She was polished in a way that looked effortless because it wasn't. Ivy could see the effort immediately. She sat with the perfect posture of someone who had decided she belonged and was daring anyone to argue. When the session broke and Ivy passed within a few feet of her in the hallway, Scarlett looked at her with a small, measured smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This doesn't have to be adversarial," Scarlett said pleasantly. "We just want what's best for the boys." Ivy looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. "You've met my sons once," she said. "Don't say we." She kept walking. In the weeks that followed, Scarlett's presence became something more structured than coincidence. She appeared at the boys' school pickup twice, not with Everett alone, smiling at teachers. She introduced herself at Miles's soccer game to another parent as a close family friend. Rumors filtered back to Ivy that she was unreliable, that she'd refused to cooperate with the custody process, that the boys were being kept from their father out of spite. Dana brought it to Ivy directly. "She's running a quiet campaign, trying to shape the social worker's environment before the home visit. It's calculated. What does she get out of it?" Ivy asked. Dana looked at her. "Everett, completely. If you're painted as the unstable party and he wins primary custody, the boys live with him, and with her. She becomes central to his life in a way she currently isn't." Ivy didn't sleep well that night. The home visit came and went. Ivy's house was clean and warm and covered in evidence of children actually living there. Drawings on the refrigerator, a science project on the coffee table, mud by the back door from the garden Miles had decided to start. The social worker, a quiet man named Mr. Donahue, asked the boys questions while Ivy made coffee. Sam told him their mom read to them every night and made the best pancakes. Theo told him about his soccer team and then, unprompted, that his mom was the fastest driver he knew. Miles showed him the garden. Mr. Donahue was carefully neutral, but he visited Everett's home too, and Ivy heard from Dana that Scarlett had been there, that the boys' rooms had been staged with expensive toys they'd never owned, and that Scarlett had answered several questions before Everett could. The court date arrived. Ivy wore a navy dress. She sat beside Dana and focused on keeping her breathing even. Everett was across the aisle, and this time Scarlett was not beside him. Ivy noticed that. The proceedings went back and forth for 2 hours. Everett's team built a case around resources and stability and his commitment to being present. Dana built a case around 5 years of documented, devoted, solo parenting and the emotional damage of disrupting the primary attachment the boys had with their mother. When Ivy took the stand, she spoke without notes. "I have never wanted to keep my sons from their father," she said. "I want them to have every person in their lives who will love them. But I am asking this court to recognize that love is not a resource. It is not a bank account, or a vacation house, or a private school tuition. I have given these boys everything, not because I had everything to give, but because I gave everything I had. That is what they know. That is their home." She sat down. Across the room, she could see something moving in Everett's face. Then Dana called her witness. The courtroom doors opened, and a woman walked in slowly, deliberately, with a cane. Her name was Helen Brooke. She had worked as an executive assistant to Everett's mother, Constance Cole, for 18 years. She was 62 years old and had the bearing of someone who no longer cared what anyone thought of her. She took the stand and she told the court what she had seen and heard in the 2 weeks before the wedding. Constance Cole had not liked Ivy. This was not a secret. She had made it quietly, persistently clear. But what Helen Brooke described went further than preference. Constance had told Everett in a meeting in her home office that Helen had overheard while bringing in coffee that was never touched, that if he married Ivy Chambers he would be cut off entirely. Not threatened, told, stated as fact. Every trust, every stake in the company, every piece of the inheritance his father had built, gone. Constance had the legal authority to do it, and everyone in that family knew it. But Helen wasn't done. There was someone else at that meeting, she said. A woman named Scarlett Vane. She was there at Constance's invitation. She'd known the family for several years. She agreed with everything Constance said. She encouraged Everett to see the wedding as a mistake. She told him that Ivy was temporary, that he was making a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. The courtroom had gone very still. Everett turned slowly in his seat. Scarlett was not there to be looked at, but the absence of her suddenly felt loud. "Did Scarlett Vane have any prior relationship with Everett Cole?" Dana asked. "She wanted one," Helen said simply. She had for years. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Ivy stood by a window and stared at the parking lot. She heard Everett's voice behind her, quieter than she expected. "I didn't know about Scarlett," he said. "I want you to know that. I knew my mother was against it. I didn't know Scarlett was in that room." "But you still left," Ivy said. "Yes," he said. "I did, and I can't fix that." She turned to look at him. He looked older than he had at the park. Not worse, just different. Like something that had been compressed for a long time had finally been let out. "Why didn't you call me?" she asked. "Not to come back. Just to tell me the reason. Any reason. Because there wasn't a reason I could say out loud that didn't make me sound like exactly what I was," he said. "A coward." She didn't respond to that. But she didn't walk away. The judge's decision came down 2 days later. Primary custody with Ivy, with structured and regular visitation for Everett, and a recommendation that both parties work with a family coordinator to establish a stable co-parenting plan. It was fair. It was the right call. Ivy sat in the car afterward and cried for 10 minutes, not from sadness but from the particular exhaustion of having held on so hard for so long. Scarlett Vane was not seen again. Everett ended the relationship. He told Ivy this plainly, one evening when he came to pick up the boys for their first overnight visit. He wasn't asking for credit. He just thought she should know. The visits became routine, and the routine became something else. It happened slowly. It happened in small things. The way Everett learned that Theo ate his dinner in a specific order and never in a rush, and stopped trying to hurry him. The way he showed up to Sam's school presentation with a handmade poster because Sam had mentioned once that he thought store-bought ones looked lazy. The evening Ivy found Miles asleep in the living room with his head on Everett's arm, both of them surrounded by the pieces of a model airplane they'd been building. And the look on Everett's face when he realized she was watching. Not embarrassed, just honest. She started to let things in, not because she forgot what he'd done. She didn't forget. She let things in anyway, because she was tired of protecting herself from something that might be real. One evening in early spring, the boys were in bed and she and Everett were in the kitchen. She was washing dishes. He was drying them, badly, in the way of someone who had not done enough dishes to develop a technique. They had been talking about nothing. School logistics, soccer schedules, whether Miles's garden would actually survive the last frost. And then Everett set down the dish towel and said, without preamble, "I want to tell you something and I don't want you to think I'm asking for anything in return." She turned off the water. "Okay, I loved you," he said. "I loved you then, and I never stopped. And I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it might not matter. But I spent 5 years telling myself it was better this way, that you were better off. And I have been wrong about a lot of things, but I think that was the most wrong I have ever been." Ivy looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up against the window. "I know," she said finally. He looked at her carefully. "Which part?" "All of it," she said. "I know all of it." She turned the water back on. He picked up the dish towel again. They finished the dishes, and she didn't say anything else that night, and neither did he. But something in the room had shifted in a way she felt, even when she was lying in bed later, staring at the ceiling. Spring turned into summer. The boys finished kindergarten. Sam won a reading award. Theo scored the most goals on his soccer team and handled the celebration with exactly as much humility as she had expected, which was none. Miles's garden produced 3 tomatoes and he treated them like they were made of gold. Everett was at all of it, not as a presence that needed to be managed, but as someone who had genuinely made himself part of the texture of their lives. He didn't replace anything. He added to it. One Saturday in July, he took the boys to the park while Ivy caught up on work, and when they came home, all 3 of them were sunburned and muddy and completely pleased with themselves. And Everett was carrying Miles on his back and laughing at something Theo had said, and Sam, serious, watchful Sam, was walking next to him with his hand in Everett's and talking. Ivy stood in the doorway and watched them come up the front walk. She thought about the woman in the bridal boutique who had said she looked like someone who deserved to be happy. She had laughed that off at the time. She understood now that the woman had simply been seeing something clearly. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Everett sat on the porch steps. She brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat beside him. The street was quiet. The fireflies were starting. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "What are you doing with all of this?" She gestured loosely at the house, the street, the general direction of her life. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying to be somewhere I should have been 5 years ago. And what if I told you," she said, "that I think you're actually there now? Not where you should have been. Here, where you are." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "I'm not forgiving the past," she said clearly. "I'm choosing the present. Those are different things." "I know," he said. "Good." She handed him the iced tea. "Don't make me regret it." He didn't. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. They were better than that. They were ordinary in all the best ways. Saturday mornings with 4 people underfoot and not enough counter space. School pickups in the rain. An argument about whether the boys were old enough for a dog that lasted 3 weeks and ended, inevitably, with a dog. A medium-sized, disreputable mutt that Miles named Professor and Sam called a menace, and Theo loved with his entire heart. On a cold Tuesday in November, Everett asked her to marry him. Not on a mountaintop, not at a restaurant. At the kitchen table, after the boys were in bed. With no ring yet because he said he wanted her to pick it herself. He said he had learned the last time what happened when he made decisions without her. She said yes. She said it once, clearly, without conditions. The wedding was small and on a Saturday in April, with wildflowers on the tables and the boys in matching ties that Theo had already untied before the ceremony started. Sam carried the rings with the gravity of someone defusing a bomb. Miles cried a little and acted like he hadn't. Theo gave a toast that was 3 minutes long and included a knock-knock joke and received a standing ovation. At the end of the night, when the last guests had gone and the boys were asleep in the car, Everett and Ivy stood in the emptied reception hall for a moment, just the two of them. "You know what I keep thinking about," she said. "What?" "That dress I had." She shook her head slowly. "I folded it over the chair before I left. I don't know why. I just folded it." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought about you leaving," he said, "every day for 5 years. I thought about you in that hotel room, in that dress. Finding out I wasn't in the hotel room," she said. "I left." "I know," he said. "That's what I thought about." She took his hand. Outside, the April night was cool and clear, and her boys were asleep, and everything that had needed to break had broken. And what was left was this, solid, true, and finally theirs.